Zimbabwe's main opposition party files a legal challenge to overturn last month's presidential election result. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni hails his country's relations with China in a bid to gain greater access to the Chinese market. And you've got a front row seat at the Made in Cameroon Music Festival outside the nation's capital. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Guido. You are in for Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Tonight we begin our broadcast with news from Zimbabwe, where lawyers representing Zimbabwe's main opposition party, MDC Alliance presidential candidate Nelson Chamisa, on Friday petitioned the Zimbabwe Constitutional Court to set aside the decision that was made by Zimbabwe Electoral Commission on August 3rd, declaring incumbent President Emmerson Mnangagwa duly elected as president of Zimbabwe. The petition effectively puts on hold the swearing-in of Mnangagwa as president of Zimbabwe, scheduled for Sunday, August the 12th. The court has to make a ruling within 14 days. Meanwhile, former Zimbabwe's finance minister and a member of the opposition party, Tendai Biti, was in court for a second day Friday, where he argued that he could not be tried in Harare because he was brought to the country illegally. He appeared before a judge Thursday, where he was charged with inciting violence. Biti was deported to Zimbabwe after authorities in neighboring Zambia rejected his bid for asylum. The court ordered Biti to surrender his passport and not to appear at any political rallies.
It's a pity that most of Africa, we don't respect the rule of law, international standards. But we survived. We live to fight another day. I'm glad to be home. And tomorrow we raise the constitutional issues around what happened to me and why I'm here when I'm not supposed to be here.
BT is one of 9 members of the Movement for Democratic Change Alliance sought by Zimbabwe police for inciting violence following last week's presidential election, which the MDC Alliance claims was rigged in favor of President Emmerson Mnangagwa. After spending hours in court today, he told journalists he thinks he will win the case. The United Nations on Friday condemned a coalition airstrike that hit a bus in Yemen, killing at least 21 children on Thursday. The strike happened in the middle of the market and targeted a bus carrying children, most of them under 15 years of age, while another 60 people were injured. The United Nations Children's Fund says with the ongoing chaos on the ground, the death toll could rise. The Western-backed alliance fighting the Houthis said its target was missile launchers used to attack the southern Saudi city of Jizan and accused the Houthis of using children as human shields. UN spokeswoman Elizabeth Rosso condemned Thursday's attacks on civilians.
We deplore Thursday's attack in Yemen, where a coalition airstrike hit a bus carrying children in Dayan Market in Sada, reportedly killing 40 people and injuring another 60. According to initial information our office has gathered, at least 21 boys, most of them aged under 15, were among those killed, and 35 other boys were injured. These latest deaths come amid a recent spike in civilian casualties over the last week that tragically demonstrates how the conflict continues to blight the lives of Yemenis.
And reading a statement issued by the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, spokesman Mikhail Zakio called for an investigation into the incident.
Secretary-General emphasizes that all parties must take constant care to spare civilians and civilian objects in the conduct of military operations, and he calls for an independent and prompt investigation into this incident.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Children's Fund spokesman Christophe Bouleriac also decried the rising numbers of children casualties in Yemen's conflict.
Yemen is the country in the world that has the highest number of children in need. More than 11 million children in need of humanitarian aid, nearly every single Yemeni child.
Coalition airstrikes in Yemen have killed hundreds of civilians at hospitals, schools and markets in Saudi Arabia, and its allies intervened in the country's civil war in 2015. Malians go to the polls on Sunday in a runoff presidential election. The rerun will be between incumbent President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta and opposition hopeful Soumaïla Cissé. Neither candidate scored 50% of the vote in the first round on July 29. The runoff will go ahead despite claims of widespread fraud in the first round. Keïta garnered 41% of the vote in the first round, while opposition front-runner Soumaïla Cissé was a distant second with 18% of the vote. Opposition candidates who fell short in first round say they will not support either of the two front-runners. This is the first time an incumbent president in Mali has ever had to face a runoff. Sunday marks one-year anniversary of the violent Unite the Right protests in Charlottesville, Virginia. Last year's protest, which was organized by white supremacists who were upset over the removal of a statue of a Confederate hero, resulted in angry clashes that killed one counter-protester and injured at least 19 people. Now, 1 year later, white nationalist groups are planning a second protest to mark the occasion, this time in Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, Virginia State Governor Ralph Northam and the city of Charlottesville have declared a state of emergency ahead of the anniversary. Anushi Avetsian reports.
Like every conversation about the city and the county comes back to August 12th, re-elected.
Mark Newton, a reporter for Charlottesville's The Daily Progress, was working when white nationalists stormed through the normally quiet college town to protest the removal of the statue of Confederate hero, General Robert E. Lee. It did not end well. Amid the angry protests, one car plowed into a crowd of anti-fascist counter-protesters, killing activist Heather Heyer and injuring many others. This picture by the Daily Progress's Ryan Kelly won him a Pulitzer Prize.
Everything is frozen in time. Everything is so perfectly placed. Like it's this kind of perfect still moment in the middle of this chaos.
Days after the tragedy, local authorities covered up the Lee statue in black. Although the divisive symbol of American slavery remains in place and black cloth is gone, Charlottesville has undergone big changes. Nikia Walker became part of that change when she was elected the city's first African-American mayor.
I'm one of those people who are with the other individuals who were out on the street, attempting to survive that day and unsure of why, the police forces, the National Guard, the state police, and the local police officers were standing around allowing us to be victimized.
Jason Kessler, the man who organized last year's Unite the Right protest, failed in his bid to hold a second rally in Charlottesville. City administrators denied his request as a danger to public safety, fearing that a second rally might provoke more violence.
Students out here
at the University of Virginia, the statue and symbols of America's slave-holding past remains a flashpoint for discussion among students.
Obviously no one's proud of him, but I don't think the university is responsible for all of its alumni, and when it comes down to it, his viewpoints are extreme, and his hatred isn't welcome here.
The university plans to limit public access to its campus grounds on August 11th and 12th to prevent potential clashes. Former city council member Bob Fenwick says the city has learned from its mistakes.
We will be better prepared because the first time the city of Charlottesville had never seen anything like this before. Our country had never seen anything like this. So there'll be many more of us this time, and there'll be fewer of what's called the alt-right, because a lot of them are in jail now, or they're on the run.
But the alt-right has other plans. Jason Kessler eventually won permission to hold a second rally to commemorate the Charlottesville protest, this time in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., right in front of the White House. Anusha Avetsian, VOA News, Charlottesville, Virginia.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Still ahead on Africa 54, the sights and sounds of the Made in Cameroon Music Festival. But first, a look at Friday's headlines.
In Zimbabwe, opposition leader Tendai Biti is free on bail after being charged with inciting public violence and unlawfully announcing the results of last week's disputed election. In South Africa, Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba's founder Jack Ma launches the Netpreneurs Prize, which will award small businesses that excel in grassroots innovation. In Nigeria, experts say there is a massive trend in the use of skin bleaching creams, injections, and pills, many of which are unregulated and potentially harmful. Finally, in Rwanda, the French language is enjoying a revival after being replaced by English as the language of education more than a decade ago, with bilingualism seen as an asset. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.
Uganda says it's keen to gain further access to China's market and enhance bilateral cooperation in various sectors such as politics, trade, infrastructure, and education. Speaking from Entebbe to China Global Television Network, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni said China has had a lot of interaction with Sub-Saharan Africa in general, and that his country has benefited from China's financial and technical aid to build dams, airport, motorways, and railways, which are currently under construction. Museveni said he hopes China will further open its financial and commodity projects to Uganda.
In recent times, China supported Africa in fighting the colonial regimes in Southern Africa. After that, we are now cooperating with China in infrastructure.
Our critics, however, say the huge debt Ugandan government owes China will be shouldered by generations to come. A China-Africa Cooperation Forum will be held in Beijing next month. Staying in Uganda, a hydropower project jointly financed by China is expected to reduce Uganda's severe power shortages and help locals develop their economy. The project is located in the small village of Nampanyi, where people are deprived of electricity, and is expected to increase the country's electric capacity by 23%. But environmentalists are raising concerns that the project, which is built on the White River Nile, may be harmful to the local ecosystem and to the livelihoods of locals who benefit from the rafting and tourism industry. Proponents of the plant, however, say it will reduce the cost of electricity, making it the lowest in East Africa. The power station is scheduled for commissioning by the end of 2018 and will supply electricity to the surrounding villages and provide employment to local residents. Now, the baobab tree dots the dry African savanna from Senegal to Madagascar. It yields a fruit that's been described as a superfood popular in the United States and Europe. With an increasing global appeal, local farmers say business is booming, but some worry that worldwide sales of the crop are not sustainable. Arash Arabasadi reports.
This farmer has been climbing up baobab trees in Senegal to collect their fruit since he was 15 years old. He uses a pole to knock the fruit from the outer branches of Africa's most iconic tree. Inside the green shell is a citrusy fruit rich in vitamin C, calcium, and magnesium. It's become a popular superfood in the United States and Europe. The growing market helped farmers band together, and business has never been better.
Before, with dealers, selling was more difficult. They would come and impose their own prices. Before, we would sell a bag at a low price, but today we earn more.
A lot more. Through a cooperative with buyers in Australia and Canada, farmers earn about $18 per sack, more than double what local middlemen offered a few years ago.
For the second year running, we have taken part in a big trade fair for organic products in Germany that covers the whole of Europe. There was a lot more interest in our baobab product this year than last year.
The baobab is not a plantation fruit, and the tree takes so long to mature that farmers largely rely on harvesting fruit from existing trees, some of which are thousands of years old. These ladies set up a nursery to grow more.
We are aware that there is less and less of the baobab fruit. We had a better yield in previous years than this year because there was not much rain. So we pray there will be enough rain so the baobabs can produce more.
Small companies like Limitless Good, along with major Western suppliers like Coca-Cola, Yo Valley, Amazon, and Costco, have helped market baobab outside of Africa. Exports rose 800% from 50 tons in 2013 to 450 tons last year. They're expected to reach 5,000 tons by 2025. That would make this a $400 million industry. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
Now, the U.S. military has an army for the ground, a navy for the sea, and an air force for the air. But will it have a space force for space? Not yet. That actually takes an act of Congress. But the Pentagon is setting up a new space command structure so that Congress could create a space force in the near future. VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb has the details.
Once thought of as a far-out idea, the Pentagon is now setting up a space command to better protect America's space assets. Speaking at the Pentagon Thursday, Vice President Mike Pence said the new command marks the first step toward ultimately building up a sixth military service branch, the Space Force, to counter Russian and Chinese threats in space.
As their actions make clear, our adversaries have transformed space into a warfighting domain already, and the United States will not shrink from this challenge.
Creating a new branch of the military hasn't been done for decades.
The last time we added a new branch of service was 1947, and that took some time getting used to.
But much like when the military established a new Air Force following World War II, after realizing the importance of air power, proponents say a Space Force is the next step for the military.
I think we are approaching that point for space, that space has become so important to our military, to our overall economy, that we're going to need a cadre of professionals that, eat, sleep, and breathe space.
Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, now endorsing the space management plans, once opposed the idea of creating another military branch. In a letter to Congress last year, Mattis cautioned against creating, quote, organizational layers at a time when we are focused on reducing overhead and integrating joint warfighting functions. For now, Space Command will integrate the military's space experts and continue to protect unmanned satellites for communications, missile warnings, and GPS. NASA will continue handling human spaceflight. President Trump is asking Congress to formally create the new military service by 2020. Carla Babb, VOA News, The Pentagon.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Putting humans back on the lunar surface is now back on the agenda. U.S. President Donald Trump in December signed a directive that he said would enable astronauts to return to the moon for the first time since 1972. Japanese company iSpace says it's finalizing a contract with a rocket company to travel into space with plans for 2 lunar missions to orbit around and land on the moon by 2020. The company says its ultimate aim is to use the rover's 4 onboard cameras to map the moon's surface and locate sources of water. The company says that water can be broken down into hydrogen and oxygen to produce fuel. And in other space news, another day, another use for 3D printing. Mars is on average 225 million kilometers from Earth, and landing the first humans there after a 6 to 9 month journey is an extremely ambitious goal. Having a place to live once they get there is another challenge. British firm Foster and Partners has submitted a concept to NASA and the European Space Agency, where a swarm of small robots would autonomously 3D print a Mars base in preparation for human arrival. Ideally, having a large number of small robots working together would mitigate any malfunctions. Billionaire businessman Elon Musk's rocket company SpaceX was founded with the aim of colonizing Mars. And finally, Airbus says its solar-powered drone has broken its own long-duration flight record, soaring through the skies for almost 26 days without stopping to refuel. Toulouse-based Airbus recently opened a production facility for its Zephyr drone just weeks after Facebook scrapped a similar project. The social network says it's now working with Airbus on this Zephyr program. Facebook's plans for its own drone was to have it provide internet access to the almost 4 billion people around the world who are currently in the dark. And that's what's trending today. Now, too many Washington, D.C. is solely about politics, lobbying, and all things administration. But to one man, the U.S. Capitol is a canvas that is just waiting to be filled with smiles and mysterious characters. Mural artist Kelly Tolles has spilled some color on Washington's manicured streets and turned a controversial occupation into a profitable business that leaves everyone happy. Anna Rice has our story.
To Kelly Tolles, making art was not a goal, it was salvation. He spent his childhood in what he calls the middle of nowhere in Australia, watching Japanese-flavored cartoons. When he moved to DC as a teenager, he learned to paint and began coloring the city to his liking.
I was doing graffiti, really crappy graffiti. I wasn't really good at graffiti. So basically, it was an outlet, though, and it was the first time I experienced like spray paint.
Tolles' arrival in the late 90s coincided with a transformation in the city and the appearance of hundreds of vibrant murals. The city may not yet be able to compete with New York, Boston, or Chicago, but more and more talented street artists are making their way to DC.
We're not known as these giant, like, icon monoliths of art and fashion. So us to be growing into that phase is really, really amazing. It's a kind of a Renaissance cool thing that's happening right now.
Tolles' art is a combination of pop art and graffiti with a touch of those Japanese cartoons he watched as a kid. His tools, hundreds of spray paint cans and anything else that comes in handy in his perfectly organized studio. In a city awash in politics, the message he wants to send to both locals and tourists is universal and nonpartisan.
Literally, if I do a mural, hopefully the vibe is, or the thing is, if somebody walks by it, they'll just smile and be content with seeing something like that.
Street art and graffiti is considered illegal in many cities, which makes it a tough career choice. It took Tolles a long time and a lot of determination to make it work.
Literally, that's what I've done. I've come from nothing. I've done everything I can to make that dream happen.
Today, individuals, restaurants, galleries, and real estate companies commission Tolles to paint their walls. Though Tolles has always worked alone, in 2017, he agreed to become regional director of Powwow DC, an international mural festival that originated in Hawaii, because it didn't feel like work at all.
And we're all family, like we're all friends. We've come into this culture and like celebrate each other and support each other, and it's really, really amazing. And to have that build up more and more every year, and to have it come to fruition and where people realize it's a benefit and they love it.
Tolles is not afraid to challenge people's ideas about what an empty wall can be, armed with a spray paint can and a smile on the wall. Anna Rice, VOA News, Washington.
Cameroonian musicians from across the United States came together for the first ever Made in Cameroon music festival outside Washington. VOA's Alzuma Compaore takes us behind the scenes at the sold-out event.
It's not often that the Cameroonian diaspora in the United States find itself under the same roof, around the same stage. But it only took an original idea and a dynamic team for this youth to live an unforgettable evening. An unprecedented festival bringing together Cameroon's most beloved music stars of the moment. But before it all happened, a little preparation was needed. 11 a.m. For the organizers as well as the artists, it's now that things are getting serious.
We're about to go do our thing. We're about to write history for Cameroon. We're here to make Cameroon proud, so it's really about to go down.
Arrived a few days ago, some of the Cameroonian guest stars are already up. But for Lynn, one of the organizers, time is money.
Hello. Are you ready?
I'm dressing up.
Good luck, my brothers.
Amen, amen.
The only song I'm waiting for is Everywhere.
6 p.m. Tension starts to build up. Last details are being checked. Inside, the party is already in full swing. One after the other, underground Cameroonian artists living in the States take turn. But the second half of the concert is a real apotheosis.
We are here first to support the Cameroonian culture, and really, you raise the bar. It's amazing. It's just excellent.
Excellent. Thanks to these musics, we remove the stress that we live every day, and frankly, bravo.
I really just love how we just all came together and made this happen. Look at the crowd. I mean, it's like packed.
Satisfied, the organizers can finally breathe.
It was a dream, been a dream for like 4 years now. I got to be in touch with IO Spaces and Icon Prod to make this happen. So I'm so excited. See you guys next year.
We never want to get involved in the day-to-day operations of companies, but in this case, we got involved 100%. I think I just wanted to not see this fail, and it's been an amazing success, so it's exciting.
This first edition of the Made in Cameroon Music Festival seems to have set the stage for a new rendezvous of the African youth in the United States. Arzuma Compaoré, VOA News, Silver Spring.
Thank you, Alzuma, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.
Welcome to English in a Minute. This expression sounds like a violent way of eating, but it's actually not always about eating.
Here is your Russian book, Anna. Thanks for letting me borrow it.
Oh, are you done with level 1 already?
Yeah, I finished last week, and I've already finished level 2.
Wow, you are really sinking your teeth into learning Russian.
Well,